this video, I'm going to talk about the subsites and their implications for the compliance and security solutions. Many organizations are still transitioning from the classic SharePoint to the modern SharePoint experience. Additionally, poor information architecture decisions, such as creating subsites or even allowing creation of the classic SharePoint sites, are still affecting many organizations. In this video, I'm going to show you what happens if SharePoint implementation was handled by people with outdated knowledge or who were not aware of the Microsoft Purview's capabilities. Disclaimer: while I'm going to demonstrate how to enable and use subsites, this is not to encourage you to use them. This is for demo purposes to show the issues that they can cause in Microsoft Purview. Let's take a look at the classic architecture, or the architecture that's based on a hierarchy. At the top we have the finance SharePoint site, and then we have the payroll, the reports, and the budget subsites. Then the reports SharePoint site has banks and the corporate reports subsites. So we have a deep nesting here. Let's now take a look at the modern architecture, or also called flat architecture. In modern SharePoint architecture, there is no sites nesting. Unlike classic architecture, where subsites form a rigid hierarchy, modern SharePoint uses a hub and spoke model. Some practitioners still represent modern site architecture with the top-level site and all other sites below it when they draw the diagrams, but this is still an incorrect representation. In reality, the hub connects independent sites without creating a hierarchy. Now let's compare the two. First, the classic architecture works because humans instinctively understand and work well with the hierarchies. A lot of things in our lives based on the hierarchies. However, it is an old school approach, and it is often implemented by people with the outdated skills based on that convenience alone. In a classic architecture, you can inherit security permission from the parent sites. Initially, it seems like a good deal. You do not have to create additional permissions. However, if you need the unique permissions, you'd have to break the security model, and everybody who work with that in a SharePoint classic sites know the nightmare that you start going through. With the classic architecture, it seems that you can just drill down and create more subsites, but it is not this case, as you can quickly realize that you have to branch out and the whole thing becomes a mess. But the biggest issue here is that the subsites are excluded from the cloud apps, from Defender and Microsoft Purview solutions such as insider risk management, data loss prevention, information protection, and record management solutions. With the modern architecture, the hub-centric approach connects related sites while keeping them separately. It is a scalable architecture. It is perfect for growing and dynamic organizations. While you cannot inherit permissions, the fact that each site manages its own permissions avoids pitfalls or issues related to broken inheritance. One of the most beautiful things about modern architecture is that the sites can be easily moved between the hubs if needed, especially if you need to adjust your information architecture. Modern architecture sites support all compliance and security solutions. It works with all Microsoft Purview and other solutions, unlike the classic architecture subsites. Future ready, designed for integration with all new and upcoming M365 features. Microsoft was very clear that the modern is the way to go, so do not get upset when the new and upcoming features do not work with the subsites. As always with Microsoft products, you can't rule out that the support for the subsites might not be available in the future at all. For now, Microsoft does allow to create the subsites, but by default, your tenant is not set up to allow that. You can view or modify those settings by going to the SharePoint Admin Center, then clicking the Settings. Then at the very bottom of the page, click the Classic Settings page link. In the Classic Settings page, scroll down to the Subsite Creation section. Notice that by default, the Disable Subsite Creation for all sites is enabled. For this demo, I'm going to enable the third option, and that is Enable Subsites Creation for all sites. Scroll down and click OK to save the changes. As you can see, it is still possible in M365 to enable the usage of these subsites, and when the information management teams set up SharePoint, they often do not think about the bigger picture. They focus on their own areas, silos, without considering how SharePoint fits into the Microsoft 365 architecture as a whole. I also wanted to show you the global experience version settings, which control creation of the modern versus classic site collections. The default setting allows only creation of the modern SharePoint sites. Even with these settings, there is still a loophole which allows creation of the classic SharePoint sites using PowerShell command new SPO site and then using specific site template which I highlighted here. Although the classic SharePoint site will be created, you will not see it in the SharePoint admin active sites list. Now that I've changed the settings, I'm going to set up a site with the subsites to demonstrate the issues they will cause with Microsoft Purview solutions. Although this is not a classic site, it is a modern site, I'm going to give it a classic finance name so that I can easily differentiate it. So here is the site created. I'm going to navigate to it. Then I'm going to go to the site contents. Then I go to the subsites, and as you can see, I don't have any subsites, but I can click on the new button and create the subsites. I'm going to use a magic of video making and save you some time. I created all my subsites, and I'm going to show you a resulting structure in a moment. Here we are in the classic finance site, which again is a modern SharePoint site that was quote-unquote labeled as classic. We go to the site settings, then in the site collection administration section, locate site hierarchy menu option and click on it. You can see that I created the exact hierarchy that I showed you in the beginning of the video for classic SharePoint architecture. Note the reports subsite. We are going to use the reports subsite with the Microsoft Purview solutions. First, I'll attempt to create a retention policy for the reports subsite. Open Microsoft Purview portal, select Data Lifecycle Management, and then select Retention Policies. Click New Retention Policy. I'm just going to be quickly following the Retention Policy creation wizard. I'm going to choose static locations for the policies. Then I'm going to remove all of the locations except SharePoint. For the SharePoint location, I'm going to enter the URL of the reports subsite. And I'm going to click Next. Accept the default, it doesn't matter. Then we submit the policy and we are going to get an error. The error says that the type of the location is site, while only site collection, top level site collection, is allowed. In classic SharePoint, the top level site is called a site collection and the subsites are called sites. In modern architecture, Microsoft uses sites, in case you're confused about this error message. As you can see, Microsoft Purview will not allow you to create retention policies for the subsite. Next, I will attempt to create a data loss prevention policy or DLP policy. I'm just going to quickly follow the wizard, mostly accepting the defaults. But when I get to the locations, I'm going to disable all of the locations and only leave SharePoint sites. Then in the scope for the SharePoint sites, I'm going to include the reports subsite. Now we submitted the policy and right away we can see the error. It's a similar error, actually the very same error that we saw for the retention policy creation. As you can see, we are not able to create the DLP policy for the subsite either. Inside the risk management policies, at least at the present, will allow you to create the policy with the subsite. However, it will not trigger alerts for that subsite. Note that I want to prioritize the content and choose the SharePoint sites here so that I can trigger the alerts from the reports subsite. I added the report subsite right here. Now I'm going to click Next and follow the wizard. As you can see, inside the risk management allowed me to add the subsite as the location, and the policy was successfully created without any error message. I tested and retested the policy by performing actions in the report subsite which would normally generate the alerts. However, none of the alerts were generated and the policy is sitting there absolutely silent. The only conclusion here is that the IRM policy does not work for the subsite either. Still using subsites? It's time to rethink.